The higher the state, the more dangerous the fall.
Anne Boleyn is a mystery that still baffles historians and artists. A figure shrouded in a mass of secrets. For 7 long years, Henry VIII sought her favor. For her sake, he broke off relations with Rome, changed the laws, created a new church, and then calmly watched the execution of the woman to whom he had once written the most passionate love letters. How could it happen that the king, who for the sake of one woman turned the entire state upside down, cold-bloodedly signed her death warrant, accusing and of treason, witchcraft, and even intimate relations with her brother? Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so as not to miss new videos. This story takes place in Western Europe at the beginning of the 16th century in England. The kingdom has recently experienced a bloody civil war, known as the Wars of the Roses. As a result, the Tudors became the dynasty that ascended the throne, and Boleyn's exact date of birth is unknown, but it is believed that she was born around 1500. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, had a successful career as a diplomat at the court of Henry VII. So successful that Anne was offered a position at the court of the Duchess of Savoy in the south of France. And then Anne was given a position at the court of Louis XII, King of France. During her time at the French court, Anne Boleyn mastered the French language perfectly, studied art, music, and religion. But it is rumored that, in addition to these sciences, Anne also mastered the art of courtly love, which occupied a special place in the French court. This passion would eventually become Anne's sharpest weapon, but also the reason for her downfall. She was a charming, graceful, and witty young lady with impeccable style and sparkling, seductive eyes. She was good at playing cards and dice, gambling, kept herself well drunk, gossiped, and could tell crude jokes. She became one of the most popular women at court and had many admirers, including the king. Now we can safely move on to a closer acquaintance between Boleyn and Henry VIII. An unpleasant tension begins to be felt at the English royal court. After more than 10 years of marriage, Queen Catherine never gave birth to an heir, that is, a son for Henry VIII. Catherine had many miscarriages and stillborn children. And here the story begins to gain momentum. Henry considers the possibility of divorcing Catherine and asks the Pope for permission. He claims that his lack of a male heir is a punishment from God for marrying his brother's widow, which was considered incest at the time. It is said that such a rapid desire to divorce Catherine coincided not only with the desire to have a son heir, but also with the moment of his infatuation with Anne Boleyn, and knew that if she could play her cards right, she could become queen. So when Henry offered her to become his mistress, a dream of many court girls, Anne Boleyn refused the role, insisting that she wanted to remain chaste until marriage. And she was right. This fueled Henry's passion even more. For 7 years, while Henry sought to dissolve his marriage with Catherine, and quite skillfully feigned shyness and contempt for the king's courtship, ignoring love letters, Henry was completely charmed by Anne's purity and inaccessibility, showering the girl with gifts. Of course, Catherine learned of her husband's admiration. But if the king's previous adventures had not ended in anything serious, then his relationship with and made Catherine nervous. The king tries so long and unsuccessfully to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon that, tired, he begins to demonstrate his relationship with and without hesitation. Please look at the picture where the king publicly courts to Queen Catherine's maid of honor, and look closely at the other courtiers and their displeased faces. Despite anyone's disapproval or condemnation, and accompanies Henry to various events, as well as on hunts. Henry could not get the marriage annulled because in the Tudor period, even a king could not simply decide to divorce. He needed a good reason and the consent of the Pope. And the Pope refused. King Henry had to renounce the church, ignore the Pope, and remove Catherine from the court, sending her to dilapidated castles, away from power and influence, and effectively invented the Church of England. Through Anne, Henry rejected Catholicism and created the Church of England in order to marry her. And finally, Henry and Anne were married. The wedding took place in January 1533 and was crowned that same summer, already 6 months pregnant. All she needed to strengthen her power was a son. But now Queen Anne Boleyn of England had given birth not to a son, but to Princess Elizabeth. Both Henry and Anne were disappointed, but they cherished the hope that sons would certainly be born later. However, a miscarriage in 1534 made Henry doubt the correctness of his choice to marry, and Henry again began to look for a solution outside of marriage, seeking solace in mistresses. And, having a hot-tempered character, did not keep quiet to the king, which began to annoy him, because he believed that the queen should put up with her husband's infidelity, as Catherine of Aragon had done. Anne's last hope was connected with her pregnancy in 1536. But again, there was a miscarriage. It is said that this happened because of the king's betrayal, and saw Jane Seymour, her lady-in-waiting, in Henry's arms, which made her nervous, and as a result, had a miscarriage. She lost her savior, her son. The distance between Henry and grew more and more. Henry was already making plans to get rid of her so that he could marry Jane Seymour, who he believed would bear him a son. In 1536, Thomas Cromwell, who had ceased to be an ally of and over a disputed division of money, took a decisive step against her. The queen, her brother, and a small group of courtiers were accused of adultery and even of conspiring against the king's life. An investigation was held into Anne's behavior, and the so-called evidence was collected. Accusing Anne of adultery was easy because of her love of flirting, although it is unlikely that she would have risked treason, and was also easy to accuse of treason against the crown. Her heated arguments with King Henry were well known, and even the slightest suggestion of the king's death was considered treasonous. On May 2nd, 1536, she was arrested and taken to the Tower of London, where she awaited trial. Henry VIII ignored any protests of the Queen's innocence. On May 15th, a mock court filled with Anne's enemies found her guilty. She had hoped that her innocence would be obvious and justice would prevail, but the cards were stacked against her. She was accused of adultery with 5 men, including her brother George Boleyn. All the charges were based on scandalous rumors spread by Anne's enemies. On May 19th, 1536, Anne was beheaded in Tower Square. She insisted on her innocence to the last, but her last recorded words were undeniable.
I have come here to die, for I am condemned by law to die, and I will say nothing against it. I pray that God will preserve the king, for there was no kinder prince in my life.
Probably uttering these words, Anne was thinking about the safety of her young daughter, Elizabeth. She was buried in St. Peter's Chapel in the Tower, and Boleyn was executed by sword, and not by the axe, which was considered a more noble and less painful method of execution in England. And Henry married Jane Seymour just 11 days after Anne's execution. But Anne's story did not end with her death, as Henry had wished. Her daughter, Elizabeth I, ruled England for 45 years, creating what we call the Golden Age. She restored the portraits of her mother destroyed by Henry and the memory of Anne Boleyn, Queen of England. Anne Boleyn is a woman whose fate resembles the most tragic Shakespearean plot. Although her life was cut short and cruelly short, she left behind an invaluable legacy. Her daughter, Elizabeth I, became one of England's greatest rulers. Sometimes the greatest tragedies can produce the greatest triumphs.